Singapore's maritime industry to enhance its competitiveness.
Already its rivals are not far behind in the transshipment business. Well, Michelle Teo looks at where Singapore stands in this week's Spotlight.
From days of manual labor and bum boats to automatic cranes and guided vehicles, the port scene has changed dramatically. Thousands of ships drop anchor in Singapore waters, making the port a major transshipment hub. Singapore has so far been able to stay ahead of the curve. According to Norwegian consultancy Menon Economics, Singapore was ranked the top maritime capital in 2017. But when compared to other nations in 2018, Singapore was ranked 9th behind other Asian ports in China, Japan and South Korea. Malaysia is followed closely behind by Indonesia and Vietnam. And what that means is that on a nationwide level, regional ports are fast catching up.
At this point, the main rivals to Singapore are the two Malaysian ports of Tanjung Pelepas and Port Klang. And if you look at the case of Singapore, while it had a virtual monopoly of the transshipment cargo market in Southeast Asia in the 70s and 80s and the early part of the 90s, over the last 20 years, Singapore's market share has been eroded from almost 100% in the mid-90s until today of just over 60%. It also faces today a second challenge coming from the development of other regional ports, which have grown their infrastructure and volume to a point where it allows them to bypass the need to transship in Singapore.
The Singapore government has or intends to invest heavily to enhance and keep its position as a maritime hub.
We will have to continue to invest in world-class port infrastructure and ahead of demand to meet the needs of our shipping alliances. This will become increasingly important because in the future, Singapore may be expected to handle heavier traffic volumes as well as larger vessels.
And the figures are already showing just that. In 2018, PSA handled 81 million 20-foot equivalent units or TEUs. Of this, more than half of the throughput came from terminals outside of Singapore, up 9.3% from last year, and this volume is expected to go up even more. This is one of the reasons why Singapore's ports will need to go bigger.
So the Tuas Mega Port is a major investment for the Port of Singapore. The main gains will come from the fact that there will be a consolidation of the 4 different terminals in Singapore right now. And the Tuas Mega Port will be the single largest port complex in the world once it's fully built out.
Technology also has a major part in making sure that Singapore stays ahead of its rivals.
So we will continue to leverage new technologies and increase automation at our ports. So one example is the Maritime Single Window. So the Maritime Single Window will be developed in 2 phases. The first phase entails streamlining of processes for faster port clearance so that we can clear more volumes. And the second phase entails faster turnaround of vessels as well as a more optimal utilization of some of the resources for port services.
Take this shore-to-ship drone project, for example. It's able to deliver items such as essential spares, medical supplies, and cash when needed. And the company says that will help raise efficiency.
We expect it will be as much as 6 times faster than the traditional means of transportation. And as a consequence, there will be, of course, monetary savings, which will vary a lot from port to port, but in some ports up to 90% reduction in cost.
Businesses, however, say more can be done.
As shippers look to get more transparency through their supply chains, then the future really belongs to those port operators, liner operators, players in the ecosystem who are prepared to work together, share information and create visibility for shippers. Those that do that, they'll be in a much better place in the future, and those that are laggards, as it were, then I think they'll find it very difficult to attract business in the future.
we tend to be in our own small sandboxes rather than going together and creating a bigger sand park or a bigger area for innovating across, which I think is a huge untapped potential. And I think the players which are able to crack this first will have a big competitive advantage.
It is insufficient for Singapore to continue to rely on productivity and connectivity in order to retain its leading position. What Singapore has done well in the last 10 years or so is in attracting and retaining some of the major customers through the formation of joint venture terminals in Singapore. And what this does is that it allows Singapore to retain and anchor the volumes of these joint venture carriers in the port of Singapore itself. And this also has a multiplier effect because these carriers not only bring in their own volumes, but it also brings the volumes of their own alliance partners.
The authorities are already working on new initiatives to ensure that Singapore remains at the forefront of the maritime industry.
There are various developments in the region that can potentially help us enhance our connectivity. One example is the International Land-Sea Trade Corridor under the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative. Another initiative that we can look forward to is the ASEAN Single Shipping Market. So beyond physical connectivity, it is also very important for Singapore to seek to be a global node for data, ideas, talent, as well as technology.
Details are expected to be unveiled in the coming days.